Hi there! An alpine or a rock garden is a real find for any gardener. It looks great, it's nearly maintenance-free after it's built, and it gains its mature look really quickly. If you're new here, my name is Irene, and today I'll show you how I made this alpine garden bed in just one season. I'll start with preparing the base. First of all, I'm covering the lawn with an old tablecloth so as not to spoil the grass. Here I had quite a large pile of clay. About a year before, I planted roses in a new flower bed, and I brought here all the infertile soil after digging the holes. For alpine and Mediterranean plants, you want to use sandy soil poor in nutrients. I'll make this mix from a top layer of soil, clay and sand. I'm removing all the clay and also taking out the upper layer of soil for about 1.5 shovels deep. Yeah, right, in order to make a little rock hill, you'll have to dig a hole first. What a paradox. The thing is that I have very heavy clay soils in my garden, and therefore good drainage is essential. It quickly became clear that I used too small a cloth and that I needed a much larger piece. I worked as a mini excavator until I dug a hole big enough. Make a pond instead, maybe? So, the first layer I'll put here is plenty of broken bricks. Then there goes a layer of gravel. Now I can be quite sure that water will not stay at the base of the bed. Good drainage is an essential thing for alpine plants. Next, I'll prepare the soil mixture. I'm mixing it by eye to make the soil very light and poor. A couple of shovels of soil, a couple of shovels of clay, and a shovel of sand. As soon as the mixture was ready, we loaded it into a wheelbarrow and poured it over the drainage layer. And here you can see the two mini excavators in action. You want to compact the soil so as not to wait for a long time till it all settles by itself. Therefore, after adding a layer of soil, I'm watering the future bed generously, making a kind of a bog, in other words. After we poured all the prepared soil into place, I watered everything well once again and left the bed for a couple of weeks for the soil to settle completely. The next step is arranging the stones. This is the most important step in creating a rock garden, I think, because it depends on the right stones laid correctly whether you get a beautiful rock garden or a pet cemetery with a shapeless heap of stones. I've decided to make a kind of a pavement along the perimeter of the bed. So I'm removing this soil here and laying flat stones flush with the surface of the lawn so that the mower could drive on them. In future this turned out to be not enough and I expanded it even more. I'll show you a little later. So here are the simple rules of choosing the right stones for your alpine garden. First, you want to choose stones of the right shape. Rounded cobblestones, something like this, will not do. In nature, you can find this kind of stones along river banks, near a sea or a lake, and even if you don't think of this, your brain just reads this information. These are the river stones on the mountain, and therefore these stones look extremely natural on a garden bed. So what you want to choose is the stones that have uneven shape with the sharp edges that look like pieces of rocks. And the second rule, you want all the stones on your alpine garden bed to have the same color, and best if they are of the same type too. We're trying to recreate a piece of landscape, like a rock is showing through somewhere in your garden. So all the stones on your alpine garden bed should look like they are sides of the same rock or pieces fallen from this rock. And therefore, best if you choose all the stones to be like limestone or sandstone or any other type you find. What you want is stones of uneven shape with sharp edges of the same color, the same type, and best if they go in range of sizes. So if you have bigger stones and smaller stones, this will make your alpine garden look the best. After I've picked the stones, I'm laying them out on the grass and I'll be positioning them. I'm taking the first stone and twisting it back and forth until I find the side that looks best to me, which will be considered as the front. And I'm placing the stone in the bed this side up. Usually it's easier to start with the biggest stones and the foot of the bed and move up gradually. This process is not fast. You'll have to pull out the already arranged stones many times, shift them here and there and position in other way. You can position 2 or 3 stones and then you see that the fourth one doesn't fit and one of the previous ones needs to be changed. In general, as you place the stones, they themselves kind of tell you how to arrange them to look the best. It took us about an hour to position all the stones. We didn't have as many stones as we would like to, and I can't say that they are super nice. These are just pieces of crushed limestone or maybe sandstone, I don't know, and we covered only the front side of the bed with them. Here I'll plant ornamental varieties and spicy Mediterranean herbs will occupy the back of the bed. After all the stones are arranged, I recommend leaving the bed for another couple of weeks so that everything finally settles, and after that you can start planting. The choice of alpine plants is incredibly rich, from very common to fairly rare varieties. The only thing I advise you to check is the size of an adult plant. Do not choose a rapidly growing species for a small bed like mine. They can simply cover all your bed in just a couple of years. Start with conifers and herbs. They'll create the structure of the bed. I had conifers in this area already, so I didn't plant any and immediately started planting perennials. At the foot of the bed, I'm planting a sage. Also, I'm planting several fescue here. I love them. They're so adorable. I'm also adding sedum. This one is a silver-leafed variety with yellow flowers. I don't know the exact name. As for the kitchen herbs, I'm planting creeping thyme. This one looked quite shaggy when planted. I ordered a whole bunch of alpine plants from a local nursery, and while I was waiting for the plants to be delivered, I worked on the area behind the bed. I wanted to mulch the space between the conifers with bark, so later I would have to weed these thickets less often. First, I'm weeding the space, and then I'm placing black landscape fabric here. In general, I don't like to put anything under mulch. The soil gets very compacted under it, but I don't plan to plant anything here. I rather want some space to make it easier to care, so I'll make an exception here. I did this in the middle of the summer, but actually ended up mulching the next spring only. A couple of weeks later, the rest of the plants ordered from the nursery arrived and I was able to finish planting. Of course, I scored a lot of things out of greed, and to be honest, I was really worried whether all these purchases would fit in my little bed. I'm filling the back of the bed with herbs. The highest one is a mountain savory, a semi-evergreen shrub up to 20 inches high in areas with mild climate, but in our country it's much lower. I'm planting amethyst fescue near it. Next comes the thyme. I'm planting the lemon Bertram Anderson thyme. It has very beautiful golden lemon leaves. In the foreground, I planted an apple blossom saxifrage, a charming evergreen little cushion that blooms soft pink in late spring. And I'm sending to the gap between the rocks the second saxifrage variety, Martha Hot Rose. It is cherry red and later becomes bright pink. I'm planting the quickly growing species on the top of the bed. Here I have a creeping phlox of the purpurea variety. It grows into a dense mat of bright green foliage similar to spruce twigs. It blooms in the end of spring with bright pink flowers, and if it likes the space, you can even get the second flowering in fall. We'll see. And the second plant for the top part of the bed is creeping Gypsophila Dorothy teacher. It blooms in June with soft pink flowers, and it can also rebloom in fall if you cut it after flowering. Between these two, I've planted the pink ice evergreen candy tuft. It blooms in late spring and early summer and grows into a bush of 15 by 15 inches. Here, into a gap between the rocks, goes yet another sedum. This one is Lidacans sedum. It has nice purplish silvery leaves and it blooms bright pink in the second half of summer. Between the firs, I'm planting a bush of oregano. Actually, I ordered a golden lemon variety for this space, but somehow they sent the variegated one to me. To be honest, I don't really like this color, but since I bought it for aroma, it will do. The oregano bush grows up to 15 inches in height. Next to the oregano, there's another fescue. This time this is the grey fescue of the Blaufuchs variety. I think these tussocks make a nice structure for the bed, as so many alpine plants are rather shapeless. The bluebell of the Blauklips variety goes to the juniper. Unfortunately, I lost it later, and last spring I replaced it with another similar one. All the bluebells are absolutely adorable and bloom almost all summer. I'll definitely plant more bluebells here. Next to the bluebell, I planted Irish moss, and alas, it also died. Apparently, neither juniper, it was too dry, so I'll no longer plant anything near the very trunk. The second plant of Irish moss I bought is green, and I'm planting it in the gap between the stones. Another golden leaf plant and another evergreen candy tuft. This one is called Golden Candy. It has beautiful golden foliage and it blooms white in late spring. Yet another creeping phlox, Purple Beauty. This one is lilac. Aubrietta Blue Blush Bicolor is also lilac with a white center. It blooms in early March, one of the first, and grows into a dense tussock up to 15 inches in diameter. To finish the Thymes collection, I'm planting the common thyme. It forms an adorable knit rounded bush. Another fescue, this time the Glaucanta variety. It makes very small spherical tussocks up to 8 inches high. I'm planting the little treasure deep rose wall cress in a gap that is rather small for it. I want it to grow down into the base of the bed. It's rich pink and also blooms in the middle of spring. I planted everything in July 2020 and finished making the bed last spring. I mulched the back with bark. Of course, it would look better to mulch it with gravel, but it makes the soil underneath so firm, so I decided not to use it, especially since this whole part of the garden where I have large trees, conifers, hostas and herbs, I also mulched with bark. So all in all, I think it looks fine. I applied the bark into 3-inch layer, and where I had no landscape fabric underneath, I made it even thicker. As you remember, first I made the flat stone perimeter of the bed to make it easier to mow. Unfortunately, that strip was not enough. Besides, I didn't like the look of the rocky hill growing right out of the grass, so I decided to widen the strip and fill it with gravel. First I laid back landscape fabric, pressed it down with stones and cut it to the desired width, making a small margin. Then I removed the soil to make something like a gravel trough. in one place I made this strip wider to plant another time here. I mixed the soil with sand, planted a time in the prepared hole, cut the fabric and laid it around the bush, and after that I mulched the entire space around with gravel. After that I tucked the fabric to the size of the trough and filled it with fine gravel. It took me only a couple of buckets. Last season I also made a few additions. I planted a rosemary bush for the summer. In our climate it grows essentially as annual, but we had fresh rosemary leaves the whole summer, and I'll plant one this year too. And I also replaced the bluebell. Finally, I mulched all the space between the plants with gravel. This makes the surface of the bed look much more natural, and also this works for extra drainage for the plants. I also want to review the plants for the alpine bed after 2 seasons, so I'll tell you a little about them. In general, all my plantings are doing very well except for the bellflower and the Irish moss, which died, as I said, because I planted them near the trunk of the juniper. The largest plants here are the creeping phlox and gypsophila. Creeping phloxes are really nice. They make a bright spot in the bed and bloom for about a month, so they are perfect for spring beds. But keep in mind that they grow very quickly, especially the Atropurpurea variety, so they may be too large for a small bed. I've left the phloxes here, but I cut them to limit growth after flowering. As for the gypsophila, I still have doubts about it. For an edge of a big raised bed it will be great, but here I'm not sure I like it. Evergreen candy tufts are gorgeous plants and I highly recommend them. They bloom in the beginning of summer and they look great from the earliest spring because they are evergreen, and also they are not as vigorous as creeping phloxes, for example, so they are a great choice for a small rock garden. Saxifrages are classic plants for any alpine garden. They have a nice foliage and bloom very abundantly. I cut flower stalks after flowering and then they make nice little bumps of mossy foliage. They are not too vigorous, so will also do for a small bed. Aubrietta was a real find for me. It is just adorable and I'll definitely buy more varieties of different shades. It also forms a neat little bush that doesn't grow too big and is one of the first plants to bloom. Sedums are another classic plants and I also have 2 of them. One has silver leaves and blooms yellow, and the second one is bluish purple with raspberry flowers. Actually, I like their foliage more than flowers. The sedums are now actually buried under the larger neighbors. I want to replant them into the gaps between the stones. Thyme is also an excellent choice for any alpine bed. All the 3 species I have are really nice. They bloom with tiny flowers and of course it's very convenient that they can be used for food. We add thyme to tea and also use it for meat or fish dishes. The dwarf white sage I have, which I forgot the name of unfortunately, does perfectly for a small bed. It reaches 15 inches maximum and it looks very organic here, but I think in June the bed is too pale somehow. There's too much white and pink, so I'll maybe replace it with a blue variety. An alpine garden is really maintenance free, and the only little issue I have here is ants. These pests love this sandy soil which I have on alpine garden, and I want to show you a little tip which helps to get rid of them. What I use is coffee. This is coffee from coffee machine, and what I'm doing is just applying it all over the places where I have ants. And ants hate coffee and they just go away, and I have no problems with them on a garden bed. And I'm doing this every season and they just go away and there's no problems with ants. I hope this video was interesting for you. Thanks for being here and hope to see you in my next video. Bye!